Hi friends, welcome back to the Healing Motherhood Podcast. Today we are talking about the ripple effect of birth trauma. If I look away from the screen, it is because I'm looking at my outline to make sure that we hit every single point. Thank you so much for being here today. Today we are talking about Dr. Cheryl Beck's middle range theory of traumatic childbirth. We're talking about the far-reaching consequences and impacts of birth trauma on parenting. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about the impacts of birth trauma on your parenting journey, including things like bonding with baby, the impacts it has on the relationships with other people, and the impact that it has on one other thing. Go back and watch it if you missed it. It's like 15 minutes. So when we talk about the ripple effect of birth trauma, let's talk first about breastfeeding challenges. So when she did this research, she saw two ways that birth trauma impacts breastfeeding. The first is the way in which people choose to go die hard into breastfeeding. It is intense. They must make breastfeeding work because they feel this guilt about their traumatic birth experience, right? This disappointment maybe that they didn't get the bonding that they wanted. And I am summarizing here. The link to more information is down below, so feel free to dive into this research. I'm just summing up what I remember from what I read, and I didn't read it today. So this is just my interpretation of what I read. But breastfeeding challenges include doing this breastfeeding at any cost, right? And that might mean way less sleep. It might mean mental health struggles. It is the most important thing for this to work to the mother. This is the camp that I fell into with my first after a traumatic birth with him. And we were lucky to have support from our pediatrician, who also happens to be an IBCLC. So I think that's international board certified lactation consultant. And she came on the Saturday after he was born. So he was born on a Tuesday night. And when he went to the NICU, so typically the pediatrician would come that first day or the day after you have your baby. Well, when they go to the NICU doctor, the neonatologist, kind of has seniority over anybody else, right? Which is not exactly okay, right? The parent should have the authority. However, we're, seeing a lot of times when they don't. And if a parent refuses, there are sometimes, really scary consequences. And we're not going to go there right now, but, it should be the parent's right as to how things are treated in the NICU, and parents have to work really hard to have their voice heard. But to leave against medical advice can be a really risky thing for families that I didn't even consider at the time, because first off, I didn't know it was a thing to leave the hospital against medical advice. And I truly just trusted doctors back then and thought that if this was where they said we needed to be, then it was. But in the NICU, we were coerced into giving our child formula. We were told that, if he didn't have a certain number of wet diapers in a certain time frame, that they would not release him. And even when they did release him, they said the only way that we will release him is if we release him to the nursery and not to us. So they released him to the nursery in the hospital, and my doctor had made it so that I could be a patient for a day longer since I still had a drain in my incision. I know that I haven't shared my whole birth story with you. If you want to drop a comment, I don't know where it fits in with our topics, but I'm happy to share it at some point. So because of the complications, she was able to have me stay until he was then released on Friday to the nursery. And then on Saturday, before we were released from the hospital, the pediatrician came. And at that point, my son was refusing the breast because it was not as fast as the bottle feeding had been. And so we were lucky to have her support in getting him transitioned from the bottle back to the breast. But my point is this was this really big, heavy thing for me. It was, bawling in the NICU, trying to get him to latch. It was very important to me to almost make up for his birth experience because I had felt so guilty. And I wonder if I can even embed this video in here, but it is a video of me just saying, "I'm so sorry, buddy. I thought we could do it." And it is, it's heartbreaking. I'm a mess from all the interventions, and it's, interesting look on me. But it goes to kind of show how heavy that birth trauma can be and how it makes a person go towards this, I absolutely have to breastfeed at all costs, at any cost, rather. So then the other thing that she was seeing in terms of breastfeeding was, just completely giving up on breastfeeding because it felt like too much on top of the birth trauma. And I think either choice is valid. I just feel like the heavy narratives on either side just make it feel like a lose-lose situation. Someone can have a traumatic birth and work their butt off to figure out breastfeeding, and then they get kind of salty about the fed is best narrative, where the fed is best narrative nowadays, I know the history of it and the roots of it, but nowadays I feel like you see people saying fed is best to kind of alleviate and assuage any of the guilt that people are feeling in making another choice. And I think that's valid. I think that people have to be able to make these choices without beating themselves up. So that's the first effect that she looks at with the middle range theory of traumatic childbirth. I want to dive a little bit into the physical impact of trauma, and I don't think she dives into this, but when we're looking at a traumatic childbirth, when we're looking at cesarean section, when we're looking at hemorrhage, things like that have a really heavy impact on the body, delay your milk production. If your body is focused on healing, it can't necessarily also focus on letting your milk come in, if that makes sense. So that is a big impact, and we have to acknowledge the impact of the physical trauma on the body in the breastfeeding relationship. So the next thing I want to talk about is the impact on special days. So this can bring up heavy feelings on special occasions like holidays, but especially when we're talking about traumaversaries. So this would be, that's right, your child's birthday. Birthdays can be especially hard for birth trauma survivors because not only is this your child's birthday that you want to celebrate them being here on this earth, but it's also a huge reminder of one of the most traumatic experiences of your life. And it is especially hard on the days leading up to the birthday for many survivors, is what the research has shown. And so what I like to do personally, or what I did before I felt like my trauma was integrated, is I like to really give myself a few days of really slow self-care explaining to my husband that I needed his support in parenting because I really just needed some time to feel my feelings, to read through my records is something that I ended up doing a lot on birthdays, to just cry, to watch some of the videos that he had taken, which I know I'm so blessed to have. I always make fun of him for all the recording that he is doing, but those videos have actually helped me to feel a lot about my birth, to paint a picture and create a timeline about my son's birth. And it's been really neat to be able to watch those while looking at the timeline and the records. So just a practical point on that, a coping tool, if you will, is to just do what makes you feel nourished and cared for. Do what it is that helps you get through those birthdays, okay? But especially treating the birth trauma in whatever way works for you. And you can get started with that by jumping on my wait list. I'm setting up something that's perfect for you to start processing so that you get to actually enjoy your baby's birthday. So the next one is trauma's influence on subsequent childbirth. So this birth trauma can impact a family's family planning efforts, right? It can make a family be one and done because they simply don't want to go through that again, right? It can create the circumstances to be re-traumatized by pregnancy and childbirth. And subsequent childbirth can actually help prompt you into healing, like it did me. With my second, we had an unintentional pregnancy. We had decided that we were done having children after my son. And after, learning more about VBAC and diving into his records just a little bit with some midwives, we had decided not to have more kids when a month later, boom, we were pregnant. And so that was really tough to navigate, especially for the first month. And then it was really the catalyst for my healing. So I'm, besides loving my daughter immensely, I am beyond grateful for the opportunity that it gave me to heal. So with that subsequent childbirth, I have done my Birthing Again program with some clients with incredible success. They've gone on to have births that, despite being complicated, still felt empowering and even, dare I say, healing. Although I will say a healing childbirth is not a thing. It does not take away the trauma of previous experiences. Those experiences need to be processed. They need to be healed. They need to be integrated. And they are their own thing. A new birth with another baby is not going to take away trauma. That's not how healing trauma works. But if you find yourself pregnant and panicking, that is something that there is help for. If you're in that boat, DM me on Instagram. You can reach out to me via email, which I'm sure you can find by clicking my links, and get support with that, whether it is from me or if you have your own coach or mental health provider that you are working with. That's a great person to talk to. A doula is a great person to talk to. Changing providers until you find one that helps you feel safer in childbirth is another option, but that is a whole separate topic for a whole nother video. But that is one of the ripples of birth trauma, is this fear of birthing again, which makes a lot of sense when you think about not only society's perception of birth, but also the previous trauma. So it makes a lot of sense, and there is hope. With this episode, I hope that there were some hints in here that help you on your healing journey. remembering that awareness is the first step. And so if you are seeing any of these ripples in your life, feel free to share in the comments. Feel free to shoot me a message. I am here. Feel free to jump on that wait list or find the link for free tools. And I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for taking care of you, focusing on your healing, because when you heal yourself, you heal the world. See you next time.